All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And as I continue to roll through my conference by conference projections for the upcoming college football season, right now it's time to talk about the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten can really poke their chest out right now in more ways than one. They have an 18-team league, okay, the biggest of all of the power conferences. They have the last two national champions. And not only do they have the last two national champions in their conference, also, we're talking about some of the premier programs in all of college football. And I'm talking about Michigan and I'm talking about Ohio State. And of course, last year, the Big Ten was the only league in college football to produce four representatives in the college football playoff. Okay. Two of them got to the semis. We saw all four of them, pardon me, three of them get to the second round. Two got to the semis. And then, of course, Ohio State won it all. But when it's all said and done, who has what it takes to survive this league again? Like I said before, an 18-team conference, a 9-game schedule, the battle to not only get to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, but also to be in the running for the college football playoff. Now, I'm going to start off with Ohio State, who did not win the Big Ten last year, didn't even play in the Big Ten championship game, but nonetheless, the Ohio State Buckeyes were still the last team standing when the 2024 college football season was over. You look at Ryan Day, and like I said, Ryan Day, after Ohio State won it all last year, he was able to exercise some demons, okay? Because for the longest time, people kept saying, well, Ryan Day can't win the big one. And of course, it looked like it was going to once again be that way when Ohio State lost their last game of the regular season last year at home to arch rival Michigan. But then, of course, with the expanded college football playoff, Ohio State got themselves a reprieve and they made the most of it. Now, when you think about Ohio State, you think about a football factory, okay, as they simply don't reload, or pardon me, they don't retool or rebuild, they reload, okay? And Ohio State lost a lot of talent from last year's championship team, but at the end of the day, it's still Ohio State. You've got to replace Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator. He's in the NFL with the Raiders, and steps former Ohio State wide receiver Brian Hartline, who's going to be the quarterback for the Buckeyes this year. Is it going to be Julian Sand? We got to wait and see. Got to replace a lot of talent at the running back position, but make no mistake about it, wide receiver Jeremiah Smith is a real deal. And I talked about this the other night when I talked about my top 25. If Jeremiah Smith had been able to leave college and go to the NFL after just one season, he would have been a top 5 pick last year. That is how talented that young man is. You look at Ethan Oniawan on that offensive line for the Buckeyes at left tackle. He's going to be important. And then, of course, defensively, Ohio State has to go out there and replace Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, who's now at Penn State, and steps former Lions head coach Matt Patricia. How is that going to work out for Ohio State? We got to wait and see. Still plenty of talent defensively for the Buckeyes with the likes of Sonny Styles, and then you got Caleb Downs in that secondary. But for me, I just want to see what this Ohio State team is made of this year. Okay. And like I said before, they've lost so much talent. They have themselves a very interesting schedule. Of course, everybody is talking about the showdown at the end of this month when they welcome Texas to the Horseshoe. They're at Washington on the 27th of September. Cross country trip for the Buckeyes. Of course, the Huskies are now in the Big Ten. They're at Illinois on the 11th of October. And Illinois, I think, under Brett Bielema, can be a very formidable team. One that a lot of people have circled this year could go a very long way in determining who gets the Indy for the Big Ten championship game. And I'm talking about when the Nittany Lions of Penn State make their way to Columbus on the 1st of November to take on Ohio State. And then, of course, going up to Ann Arbor to finish the regular season. Speaking of those Penn State Nittany Lions, they've been right there. But then they've been knocking on the door, and of course, Just like it's been for Ryan Day, it's the same thing for James Franklin, not being able to win the big one. And of course, he got Penn State to the Big Ten championship game last year. Penn State fell short of winning the Big Ten to Oregon. We saw Penn State get to the semis of the college football playoff. They had their opportunity to get past Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, and of course, didn't happen. Nonetheless, Penn State still has a very talented team. A lot of people felt that quarterback Drew Allar was going to come out of school last year and go to the NFL. He decided to come back to school, and he's probably going to try to right some wrongs, especially in that Orange Bowl loss to Notre Dame. He did not look sharp. Penn State's got to replace Tyler Warren at tight end. Easier said than done. But I think Penn State is really going to rely on their running game with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen this year. Losing Abdul Carter, who was a top 5 pick in this year's NFL draft, is going to hurt Penn State. But nonetheless, they still have plenty of talent on the defensive side of the ball, and they're also bringing in former Ohio State coordinator defensively Jim Knowles. On the 27th of September, we are going to see Penn State get Oregon in a rematch of the Big Ten championship game as the Ducks come to Happy Valley. Going west to the Rose Bowl on the 4th of October to take on UCLA should be an interesting game. Traveling to Iowa City to take on Iowa on the 18th of October. Always a tough place for opponents to go play. Like I said before, they're at Ohio State on the 1st of November. And then they get Indiana, another playoff team from last year, who will come to Happy Valley on the 8th of November. Speaking of those Ducks, smooth transition for Oregon from the Pac 12 to the Big Ten. Why? Because, yes, the Ducks fell short of winning it all last year, but not only did they win the Big Ten last year, they were the only team within the Big Ten to go undefeated in conference play. In recent years, we've seen the Ducks go to the transfer portal to get their quarterbacks. Not going to be the case this year. Looks like it's going to be Dante Moore at the controls for head coach Dan Lanning. But Oregon did go to the transfer portal to get themselves a new running back in Mekhi Hughes. And of course, anybody who watched college football and who has watched college football over the last couple of years saw Mekhi Hughes tear it up for a couple of years at Tulane. I like this Oregon defense. You've got Bryce Botcher at linebacker, could be one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten, in my opinion. And then Mateo Uiagalelei is one of the better pass rushers in that league as well. 8 projected starters defensively for the Ducks are seniors, and that leadership is going to be important as Oregon looks to once again win the Big Ten. Very favorable schedule for the Ducks. I talked about them going to take on Penn State. They don't have to take on Ohio State this year. They don't take on Michigan. So let's see if the Ducks have what it takes to once again win the Big Ten. The Fighting Illini of Illinois under head coach Brett Bielema. They're coming off of their first 10-win season in 23 years. And let's see if Illinois can take that next step, possibly get to the Big Ten championship game for the first time in school history, and possibly their first college football playoff bid. You've got a senior at quarterback for the Illini in Luke Altmaier. You've got a ton of experience on that offensive line for Illinois with 4 seniors. And of course, when you think about Brett Bielema, it's all about that offensive line. This is a blue collar team. This is a team, in my opinion, that embodies their head coach and Brett Bielema. I like this defense with outside linebacker Gabe Jacas, as well as middle linebacker Dylan Rosiek. And then you got to keep an eye out for free safety Xavier Scott. I'm looking at Illinois. They've got an opportunity to make a couple of statements on the 20th of September. They travel to Bloomington to take on Indiana. They follow that up the following Saturday by hosting USC, and then they get Ohio State later in the year. Everything is there for Illinois to try to go out there and make statements and make some noise in the Big Ten. Will the Illini be up for the challenge? We've got to wait and see. Now, for USC, what can you say about Lincoln Riley? Because he came out of the gate in Los Angeles like gangbusters. He got SC to the Pac-12 championship game in his first year. There they lost. And then, of course, bad 2023 for SC with a lot of expectations. And, of course, year number one in the Big Ten, it did not go as planned either. So SC began last year ranked in the top 25. They limped to a 7-6 mark, and then they were 4-5 within the Big Ten. And you got to ask yourself, is the pressure on Lincoln Riley this year? Absolutely, because USC did not go to the Big Ten, and it doesn't matter if it's Pac 12, Big Ten, wherever for the Trojans. They're not there to be a mediocre team. Now, surprisingly, SC lost quarterback Miller Moss in the portal as he is now with Louisville. So it looks like it's going to be Jaden Mayava at quarterback for SC to begin this season. USC is going to score points. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the biggest thing for me with the men in Troy under head coach Lincoln Riley, they have got to find a way to stop people defensively. And I really can't understand why SC cannot go get it going defensively, especially when you think about how talent rich high school football is in California. A lot of athletes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And when you think about the history of USC football, it's not just about their offense, it's about the defensive players that they have sent to the NFL as well. Interesting schedule for USC. I talked about the Illinois game. They get Michigan at home on the 11th of October. Of course, when you think about USC and Michigan, you think about two teams that have met in the Rose Bowl more than any other schools in the history of that game. Of course, the iconic matchup with Notre Dame on the 18th of October as SC is going to travel to South Bend. Hopefully, this is not the end of that rivalry. In October and consecutive weeks, SC's got to travel to Eugene to take on Oregon. And then, of course, they get UCLA at the Coliseum to end the month of November. Now, for Michigan, they took their lumps last year after winning the national championship the year before. Of course, new head coach and Sharon Moore, you name it. Michigan is still going to be a force to be reckoned with. I like their defense under defensive coordinator, almost called him head coach, Wink Martindale, but nonetheless, Michigan's going to run the ball. They've got to find a way to throw the football more effectively than they did last year if they want to be thought of as far as possibly winning the Big Ten Conference. You look at Minnesota, this team right here under head coach PJ Fleck. Minnesota's a team, they're right there, but they just have not been able to get over that hump. And I'm looking at the Gophers' schedule this year. It's going to be trying for them. They've got to go to Ohio State on the 4th of November. They're at Iowa to finish the month of October as well. You're talking about a trip to Oregon this year. They're at Northwestern. And really, they're playing at Wrigley Field rather, as opposed to playing on Northwestern's campus. And then, of course, finishing up at home with Wisconsin. Now, another team that saw the transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, and I'm talking about UCLA. And UCLA was a scrappy team last year under head coach Deshaun Foster. They took their lumps, but I think UCLA, they could possibly finally be building something under Deshaun Foster. You're talking about a UCLA alum. He really bleeds Bruin gold, and he wants to try to get this thing turned around. Nonetheless, UCLA's offense has to improve as they were 117th in the nation a year ago. They get former Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava, and of course, we know about the controversy there. But I think Nico and his family and everybody else surrounding him are finally happy. And I think that could bode well for UCLA's offense this season. And like I said, speaking of this Bruins offense, they've got to find a way to run the ball better. And you think about Deshaun Foster, he wants to run the ball. Only Kent State and Colorado were worse at running the football last year than the Bruins. UCLA's got to replace their top three tacklers from last season defensively as well. I'm looking at UCLA. They're going to fly under the radar this year in the Big Ten, but I think if they could find a way to finish the season with a winning record and get to a bowl game, I think that would be big for that program. Now, talking about teams that came out of nowhere, that's what Indiana did last year. They had one of the greatest single season turnarounds in college football history. The Hoosiers basically went from being a cellar dweller in the Big Ten to winning 11 games, as well as reaching the college football playoff for the first time in school history. But of course, 2024 is in the rearview mirror. And now people want to see what are the Hoosiers and their head coach, Kirk Cignetti, going to be able to do again. I think Indiana relies on the experience that they're bringing back defensively, led by outside linebacker Aiden Fisher. I think he will be a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year candidate in my book. Also, outside linebacker Mikhail Kamara, strong safety Amari Farrell. For Indiana, they don't play a Michigan. They don't uh, play on Ohio State teams like that. They got to go to Oregon this year, which is not going to be easy, and they've got to go to Penn State. So let's see if Indiana is going to be up for that challenge. You look at Nebraska and head coach Matt Rule; he's building something, and you just have to wonder if this is going to be the year where the Cornhuskers are able to break through. Dylan Raiola has had his ups and downs as the starting quarterback for Nebraska. I think at the end of the day, people want Dylan Raiola to come in and be the magician right away, and it takes some time. There's a learning curve. There's going to be growing pains for a young quarterback. So maybe this is a year where it all comes together. And you think about Nebraska; they took their lumps last year because they had so many games that were decided by one possession or less. They were 2-5 in the 7 games that were decided by one possession or less. If Nebraska can find a way to flip that around to 5-2 or better, we're talking about the Huskers in a different light this year. You've got the Washington Huskies, and we saw Washington get to the national championship game in 2023. Of course, they lost so much talent from that team, including their head coach, who's now at Alabama. Now you've got Jed Fish, the former Arizona head coach, and this is year number 2 for him. Washington had their ups and downs last year in year number 1 in the Big Ten, and I want to see what the transition is going to be like for Jed Fish and company in year number 2. They've got to go to Washington State on the 20th of September. And if anybody remembers that game, the Apple Cup, of course, it's not the same that it was since Washington's no longer in the Pac-12. But nonetheless, these two teams met on a neutral site last year in Seattle, and it was Washington State that upset Washington. Okay, the Huskies get Ohio State coming into Seattle on the 27th of September. They're at Michigan on the 18th of October, and then of course they finish up with Oregon. For Rutgers, they're hopeful, and you got to be hopeful if you're Rutgers to not once again be along for the ride in the Big Ten. I've always felt like, you know what, Rutgers going to the Big Ten was all about money. And at the end of the day, if the Scarlet Knights can find a way to finish with a winning record and get to a bowl game, I think that is a big move, considering what they have to deal with in that league consistently. And for the most part, Rutgers is very competitive under head coach Greg Schiano. I will say this about Rutgers, regardless if they're 4-8, 7-5, or 8-4. The bottom line is, when you take on Rutgers, you better pack a lunch. You've got senior quarterback Ethan Kaliamanis. You've got wide receiver Ian Strong, and you've got experience on the offensive line for the Scarlet Knights. The bottom line is with Rutgers, they've got to go out there and take care of their business in the games that they are expected to win, because they're going to have an uphill battle when they have to face the likes of an Ohio State and a Penn State. But one game I'm very interested for and watching with Rutgers this year on the 27th of September. The Scarlet Knights will travel to Minnesota to take on the Gophers. And of course, that's where Ethan Kaliamanis got his start collegiately for the Gophers. So it's a homecoming for him. Now you've got Iowa. When you think about Iowa under head coach Kurt Ferentz, this is a black and blue physical football team. You know what you're going to get with the Hawkeyes. Running game, solid tight ends, a solid offensive line, and a very stingy defense. With that said, Iowa still has not figured out the forward pass under head coach Kurt Ferentz, as they were 130th in that category in the nation last year. Like I always say, when you think about Iowa, you think about their defense, and I'm looking at defensive tackle Aaron Graves, who could be one of the best defenders this year in the Big Ten. Now, you look at the Badgers of Wisconsin, and in 2 years under head coach Luke Fickell, they're just 12-13, as he's yet to make an impact that the folks in Madison wanted him to make. And of course, last year for the Badgers, they lost their last 5 games to end the season. Wisconsin was another team that had struggled in passing, 102nd in the nation last year. They have to find a way to fill that void if they are going to be able to keep up with the big boys in the tough Big Ten. Michigan State, they're in their second year under head coach Jonathan Smith. What are we going to see from quarterback Aiden Childs this year? That's going to be a big thing as Sparty looks to be relevant once again in this league. Now, for Maryland and head coach Mike Locksley, of course, last year was a struggle. He's talked about it. Let's see if Maryland can put that behind them and become respectable this year, but it's going to be easier said than done for the Terps in the Big Ten. Northwestern, they've had a recent trend where they put together a losing season or put together a winning season after they had a losing season. Let's see if that trend continues. The Wildcats were 130th in the nation in offense last year. That's not going to get it done. They've got to improve. They brought in former SMU quarterback Preston Stone. They've got an offensive line full of grad students and seniors, and of course they have a solid defense led by defensive end Aiden Hubbard. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Wildcats have what it takes to become bowl eligible this year. And finally, there's the Boilermakers of Purdue. And of course, they've really fallen on hard times. They only won a combined 5 games over the last 2 years, which included going 1-11 last year for just the second time in school history. In steps former Missouri and UNLV coach Barry Odom to try to turn things around, and he's really going to have his hands full in regards to the fortunes of the Boilermakers. Purdue was 127th in the nation on offense last year, which included being shut out 3 times. Okay, so that's got to change. Purdue has really hit the portal, trying to have a quick turnaround. Let's see if it's going to help. I talked about their offensive issues. Defensively, it was not too much better last year either for the Boilers, as they were 124th in the nation on that side of the ball. So Purdue definitely has their work cut out for them. But when it's all said and done this year, with the Big Ten, I see some of the usual suspects going at it again. I think Ohio State is once again going to be in the mix to win the Big Ten. I like Penn State's chances. I think Oregon is going to be right there as well. I think if everything can come together for Illinois, I think they could be a player in the Big Ten championship race. SC, I think, will be improved as they get adjusted more to life in the Big Ten, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them to get to Indianapolis. And I think Sharon Moore is really still trying to establish himself at Michigan, in my opinion. But when it's all said and done, Big Ten championship game wise, I'm looking at a rematch from last year. I'm looking at Penn State and I'm looking at Oregon. And hold on, folks. I think Penn State wins the Big Ten this year. I'm not saying national championship, but I think nonetheless, this may be the year where James Franklin finally wins the big game within the league. Of course, he's still going to have that cloud over him as far as like his struggles against top 5 teams. But I really like Penn State's chances to win the Big Ten. I think Ohio State's going to be in the mix to get back to the playoff. I think the same could be said for Oregon. I think Indiana's going to be in that picture to possibly get to the playoff again. And I like Illinois to hang around there if these teams can take care of their business. Like I said before, Oregon went undefeated in the Big Ten last year. I don't see one particular team going undefeated this year. This is a very deep league. I think everybody's going to lose at least one game within the Big Ten. Last year, both Indiana and Penn State went 8-1 during the regular season. Like I said, Oregon was 9-0, and then Ohio State was 7-2. So if anybody could get to Indianapolis in December for the Big Ten title game and only have one loss within the Big Ten or less, good luck. But like I said before, I really don't see anybody going undefeated this year. But nonetheless, I think when it's all said and done, Penn State will be the last team standing for at least the Big Ten regular season. Not saying playoff, but nonetheless, at least for the regular season in the Big Ten. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, please feel free to hit the like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. And also, as I continue to go through my conference by conference breakdown for the upcoming college football season. Tomorrow, it will be all things about the ACC. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me the follow, I'll give you that follow right back. And the same could be said for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.